So there's one very similar question that was partially answered right now, but I will just say a little bit about it anyways. It says, can you say something about the willingness to suffer? It also has a word how, so I guess it also asks about how. Well, can you say something about the willingness to suffer? So basically, the willingness to suffer is to adopt that attitude of meeting with the stuff that comes up, which inevitably will come up and should come up. But it's not meant like well, I see sometimes this like actually trying to seek out suffering or like physical suffering, like beating yourself up or making your life harder than it is. But it's not that's not what is meant. It's meeting with our own baggage, our own stuff, in the sense that was, or in the way that was just described. So that is willingness to suffer.
May I just come in on it's the answer also to the last question with regard to the emotion such as anger and identifying and the texture and shape and that brings me back to the two-part formula of identifying it. And then now when you mentioned about the sandbox, like the children in the sandbox, I know in the two-part formula it was the thing of actually then identifying it, the texture, the shape and that, and then the light of awareness dancing through it, you know? Are you talking about that type of interaction with the pain, or are you talking about just welcoming it or putting a light on it, or that interaction? What type of interaction?
I'm talking about exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's like I was just saying about integrating or joining samsara and nirvana. So in two-part formula you have two modes and you join them, which is bringing light of awareness into that shadow, or inviting the kids of samsara into the sandbox of nirvana.
Okay.
Just on that point again, it's like I sort of think that maybe from as I was brought up not to view emotions as good things. You know, that you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't. So it's always we've got a strong habit to push stuff away anyway.
Yeah. Something I forgot to say. Maybe if you can turn the mic, just spin it around. Now we again have the problem of one microphone. Sometimes it becomes a circus with this thing. So I'm just checking that it gets to the tape. Is this mic going to the camera? Yeah. So something I forgot to say about that is that in our system of training we practice Rushen. And Rushen is brilliant for this stuff. I don't know if it's correct English, but playing out anger, playing out emotions. In in February in Dublin, I was talking about Rushen, and I've talked about it, of course, before. But so we can see Rushen from the point of view of 6 realms. And anger happens to be like a demonic state, angry demon state. So when we are in the experience of anger, it's like being an angry demon. And Well, as a side note, sometimes people can even see these demons, like demon figures, showing up in their mind. Fuck. But this is, this is what it is. But Rushen, what, whatever the emotion is, whether it's a demonic state or, pitiful state or, greedy, hungry ghost state, you act it out and you play it out in Rushen practice. That's why Rushen is also, it's a hardcore practice. But it, often on retreats, it's kind of like nice Rushen. It's, just shaking a little bit. Oh, I'm really releasing stuff here. But what Rushen means is that you have time and space for, for all this. It's real. And this is why, like in classical Dzogchen manuals, it is said about Rushen that you practice Rushen, that you go to a nature or a natural location where you won't be disturbed and you are not disturbing others. Exactly because it's the real stuff, not just. Okay?
Sorry, Kim, do we need to know why we're angry in a demonic state for it to heal?
No, we don't have to. We don't need to know. But the standard explanation is that, Buddhism has this theory of reincarnation, transmigration between the realms, and default value is that we have had countless lives before, and karma keeps accumulating. These habit patterns, they accumulate and come into form and being over countless lifetimes. So that's the general explanation for it. But more specifically, no need. What is more important is the know how to deal with it, obviously.
Exploring what it means to be in the natural state. Being in the natural state is the natural state simply being present and being cognizant of your feelings, thoughts, being aware of the energy underlying these feelings, and deriving a sense of stability from this consciousness. I do believe something different happens when I shout pet, etc., but it is very brief. An absence of thought, a sort of tingly sensation. After that, I just attempt to stop myself doing anything and thus to stay present, occasionally noting the feelings and energies. Do wonder, though, if this is doing anything. So I guess the problem is that we are like the natural state can be fully recognized. I've talked about this before, but it can be fully recognized and it can be partially recognized. And most often, especially in the beginning, it's partially recognized, but it is still the natural state. So like the full experience then there is no question, because it kind of everything falls away, every doing falls away. So there is no back and forth, or like, am I doing the right thing? So any distance to any perceived object, or like any sense perception, falls away, in the sense that there are thoughts, or there can be thoughts, there can be sounds. All of these sensory, what's usually called objects, but they lose their objectness, and thus the distance to them. But it's kind of like a buoyancy. So when something floats, it cannot sink. Like if it has buoyancy, it doesn't sink. So we just sit, and there is this very natural buoyancy to it. Like no fear of sinking or being distracted or anything like that. And yes, because of these, like, because this thingness to experience falls away, you can feel all the sensations become stronger in a way, or not stronger, but more clearly felt. So the body is felt, our bodily feelings are known, and what does it say? Yeah, so this awareness of feelings, thoughts, and energy floating is just there without having to particularly feel any different part of it. And then it says also, and deriving a sense of stability from this. So the stability is in that buoyancy, that there is no center to be pulled away from, if that makes sense. So the stability comes through this lack of direction, of going in different directions. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it too well. But in the second part here, so I do believe something different happens when I shout pet, etc., but it is very brief. An absence of thought, a sort of tingly sensation. Yeah, well, so, and then after that, I just attempt to stop myself from doing anything, and thus to stay present, occasionally noting the feelings, energies, etc. So it's like when the instruction is to not do anything after shouting or after cutting through, it's like dropping something, in the sense that once it's dropped, you don't have to do anything. Like it says that attempting not to do anything, but just drop it completely, if that makes sense. Like there is no fighting not to it doesn't work, the metaphor that I had in mind. You would just simply drop it and be aware of what it is that happens. And that can be tingling sensations, and it can be absence of thoughts. And here is where it comes in, like and it can be very brief. And it usually is very brief when we start out. So not to worry too much after doing the shouting. Like whatever it is that is experienced after having cut through, just be with that, like not trying to complicate the matter too much, and eventually it will become less brief, so that it's easier to recognize the different qualities of it. And that, what I was talking about, like the partial and the full. The partial whole can become bigger, so that it's easier to see what it actually is. But I can recognize tingling sensation, yeah.
I think an important point that Kim has made there is that, for me, is that when you can identify your feelings, you already are objectifying them, and so therefore you can see them, and so therefore, I think that gets back to a really, really deep fear that I had, is that I really believed at one point in my life that there was no way I can possibly ever objectify anything, because I thought, well, isn't my thoughts also conditioned? How can I ever? But I guess what I've come to the belief is that I've got to suspend that notion and assume that I am in a way outside, or God perhaps, and that I can actually see myself separate from the world, or what's going on, and somehow objectify it. But that does kind of run counter then to this notion of not being separate from objects, which is something, another theme that.
But we are talking about, like, when objectifying something, it's not about thinking about that you have thoughts about it, and like answering these vipassana questions, like how big is it? And it's not about giving a mental answer to it. It's about the direct experience of it. So these questions are just pointing in the direction of what to feel into. Because with thoughts, I imagine it is pretty hard to get to a God perspective and be able to fully, do you understand what I mean? We are not trying to describe something completely objectively mentally, as the ultimate perspective, but the direct experience of how it's felt. Just like in the two-part formula, it doesn't. We can create all kinds of stories about the I, but it won't go away until it's directly experienced. The pure sensation of it. So that is like all these questions are intended to bring about that direct experience, and not to be answered mentally in some kind of objective or ultimate way.
I think for me, and if we just comment on this, if there was some way of measuring natural state, and given that in fact that, say, the take it that the body is dead or nearly, there's no such thing as nearly dead really, the body is either alive or dead, right? But for me, there is a degree to which one actually enters into the natural state. And in a day here, I can be, I think, and I just want your comment on this, that I can, after pets and that, I can feel that I'm in that relaxed state. Again, going back to the two-part formula, when I was doing it, I had a problem after about 15 days of it, of trying to find the eyeless state. I lost it completely. And I remember Rinpoche saying to me that you just go, and you repeated it, I think, today also, about going into that very relaxed state of after work or after a big workout or something, you come back. I think at the time you said, you come back to the house and you have a lounger outside, you have a glass of wine and the sun is shining. You don't have a care in the world. Enter into it through there, Joe, you know? And I can feel that, you know, a degree of that during practice here, you know? And then at other times, like just before lunch there today, I could feel, oh, my whole pace slowing down, you know, and being really pleasant, you know, meeting people in the door and going, yes, after you, and just floating along. That it's just different degrees of it. It can, not that I'm turning it up or turning it down, it's just actually either that. My take on that is that, am I on the right area or am I?
Well, that is what I mean by that there are two perspectives to look at it. There's a relative perspective where there are fluctuating degrees of recognition of the natural state, and then there's absolute where there just is the natural state in full recognition. Or so yes, as a samsaric being, there will be fluctuations in the recognition of the natural state throughout day, throughout week and years of practice. Like people who don't practice also recognize the natural state sometimes as glimpses.
Yeah, it's something that's discussed, you know, a lot within the Sangha about natural state, and I think it means different people. But for me, it is that degree to which it can actually be up or down and does fluctuate. And sometimes there are people say, "Gee, I'm not getting this natural state thing at all," you know. But I think people are getting degrees of natural state, and it's actually working. It's cumulative. Like the extent to which I would feel now in the upper part of it is greater than I would have had when I actually came into open heart.
Is it degrees, or is it just the experiences? The experience of it can be different. You know, because like sometimes I feel, you know, really, really energetic, and other times, you know, really kind of calm. So for me, it's not so much degrees; it's just the nature of the experience varies from almost like, well, not moment to moment, but certainly within a short period.
Well, by degrees, I mean, in fact, in measuring it on a like a mileometer on a car, you know, that it's actually, I'm either up on the top quartile or half or lower quartile. And I don't think of it in such technical terms, but it's just that when we're speaking about it now, and in conversations, I remember a few weeks ago, and also some conversations that I've had here, that in fact that there's, it tends to be, you know, in some of the conversations, a feeling that you're either in it or you're not in it, you know. But for me, there is that, you like the mileometer, I can be up along it, and I just wanted to just check on that. That was all.
Yeah, in one sense it's true that it's either or, but in another sense. But yeah, also like it seems that the qualities that are described quite often can vary in degree of how apparent they are. So sometimes aliveness aspect isn't as, but in a sense it doesn't fluctuate. Like it's not about the content of the experience either. So the natural state in some senses remains the same. Like it's not like you were saying that it's just different experiences or different.
I think it's like, almost as you're saying, so sometimes the aliveness seems to be dominant, and sometimes the sort of the knowing seems to be more prominent. I guess that's my.
Clearly, for the birds, if our mind is distracted, we don't get any of it.
What's that?
If we're distracted in thought. You know, there's no there's no awareness there. There's no recognition there.
Completely distracted. in
Yeah.
thought.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But there can be.
Partial. Yeah.
Yeah, there can be thoughts that are kind of partially identified, partially not.
And they're the lighter thoughts. They're the ones that you can actually observe just going across. You're not catching them, you know? It's those type of thoughts.
Yeah. Also depending a bit on how much it is recognized, how much it is realized. Because all thoughts essentially, no thoughts are by nature like this like all thoughts can be disidentified with, or not, that the identification.
I have some thoughts and they just actually can just glide across and I can see them and I don't attach to them. There are other ones and I'm into them before, you know?
Yeah. But I'm just saying that even like if depending on the level of realization, even the more volatile thoughts can lose their ability to. That's what I'm stumbling to.
When you're saying thoughts, presumably include emotions in that, or anything that's going on in the samsaric mind, essentially.
Yeah.
I love the picture on your website of the person standing in the train going by. Do you know the one and it's the caption is stability in motion. I find that notion very helpful. I mean that. You know, the thoughts can be going by, but you can still be in a stable state.
But I think that we have a tendency to a lot. Just the mind complicates this whole thing a lot, making it into this really like even experiences, when they are remembered, they get colored like oh, it was so amazing, this and that, like and then the next time the natural state is experienced, is while the experience is there, it's very ordinary and normal, and then when the mind kicks in again, it can make it into a big deal. That so my point was that so that it means a lot of different things to different people, and they say like, I don't get it, and but it's very simple when the recognition is there.
I think the notion of partial recognition is very useful to me, because I thought, oh my God, I'm not getting this at all.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, for example, when the instructions here now with recognizing the natural state, it's not like if you get like I guess if it's like a either or, then you just get stuck in that and you never meet the. So it's not like you disqualify for that practice if the natural state isn't fully recognized before starting the vipassana.
You recognize it as yourself, you know, you see, oh, you know, you get a flash and it feels different from your, you know, conditioned experience. And maybe it's only a little flash, but there's just a freshness and an aliveness to it that's you know, it can be subtle, but it's clearly different from where you were before. Yeah. In daily life,
I am not sure whether to chant mantras or just be with the felt sensations of my experience. What is the ratio of chanting, in parentheses, silently, chanting mantras, energy work, and just being present in daily life? Well, I think it's difficult to put a ratio on it. It's very individual what is needed, but mantras and tantric work should be used as needed. So if things are clear and it's easy to, what was the? If it's easy to just be with the felt sensations of the experience, then just be with the felt sensations. But if it gets very clouded and murky, or if there even is that, like, what should I do? Then maybe mantras will work. Or mantras are the way to go, or energy work. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that more. Yeah, I think I will leave these two. Are there any other questions or comments?
I've been trying to think of something practice related on it. I don't have any good practice related questions. But the only thing I can think of that I can, Ripshay mentioned the other day about turning inward on the looker, like, if you know what I mean, like Vipassana turned inward. And I get that, like I kind of get it. I think I've practiced a bit before, but I'm not really sure when to do it and what's the kind of, if there's anything more to say about it. I'm not sure, maybe there's not, but is there something to say about the reason for doing it, or
Is it looking at the source of steam?
Yeah.
So if you notice that there is a strong outward direction to, for example, seeing, then it can be explored, and the purpose is for to clarify the particularly the knowing aspect. Like that's like that area behind the eyes inside the head is a good entryway to the knowing aspect. So the purpose is to further clarify the natural state.
What was the question? It wasn't really a question. It's about like Vipassana kind of inward rather than on something that's coming up like an object, thoughts or emotions, but turning in on the one who's looking. I was just kind of asking for elaboration on that.
I mean, I imagine the purpose of that is to realise that it's not the person looking outward that's doing the viewing. Because clearly if you are looking at the person just doing the viewing, then that's someone else. Or am I just getting tired, getting myself up and not to? So you're looking at the normal source of how we see things.
So I guess the point is to see that, like, as far as how I experience is that when you start looking, so usually there is that direction, and there is usually also kind of a sense of there being something there that is looking. But if you actually look, then that solidity, like that subject or that source, is seen to not be solid. So there is just that seeing happening. And same with sounds. That knowing doesn't have a center in that sense. Do you want to say anything?
I could continue on that, but I can come there. So we were just talking about this actually the other day with Tommy. This same question, turning the attention back into the head, and just in this session there was the previous question of having strong emotions like anger and how you identify with it, and even like post first bhumi opening, post awakening. These emotions, even if you have awakened, and therefore there is no tyrant sitting here on this throne in here. There's no tyrant there. It's an empty seat. But when a demon of anger or demon of fear or whatever emotional reaction happens, it hooks into this same seat. So that is a useful practice in that case to look back into the space behind the eyes to help disidentify from it, so that then the emotional state can be objectified. Okay? So that is very useful in this sense. And in general, without emotional state, just looking back to it, is there somebody or something looking out through my eyes, hearing through my ears, feeling down into my body, or is it simply, in classic Buddhist terms, is seeing simply seeing, hearing simply hearing, feeling simply feeling? Simply clarifying this selflessness of that experience. It's very, very useful. Like knowing awareness, this simple knowing, simple sensing is really as you know, the bedrock of Dzogchen practice. And that's always like, even though the three basic characteristics of the natural state are really qualities of the same thing, this is why traditional Dzogchen and open heart Dzogchen starts from knowing, because when you have that box checked, then you can easily have the other two. But if you start with aliveness, you can go wrong in many, many ways. I've talked about this too. People follow bliss, which is one kind of aliveness. People follow this and that energetic sensation, which are also kinds of aliveness, but they are misleading. And they are misleading because that knowingness is not there. And they are also misleading because that groundedness is not there. But also groundedness can be misleading alone, because without that knowingness, it's it's one type of sensation. But when groundedness is combined with knowingness, then it's again a different story. Actually, this like overkill of groundedness, it happens in Zen practice. It happens in martial arts, inner martial arts, a lot. Although the purpose of martial arts is not to purpose of it is different than what is done in Buddhist meditation practice. But nevertheless, it happens. So it's a good little technique. Often, like when giving guidances to awakening, something that can be like a turning point and has been a turning point for many candidates has been to to realize that we are so accustomed in having the headlights only that way. Where is the answer? Where is happiness? Gotta find it, gotta take a hold of it. But then, pointing out that you can actually look back into the source of looking and people go, bing, So the seeking ends. Seeing through the seeker. And when that happens, first bhumi opens. Let's sit a moment and then chant the Bodhisattva vows before break. Just to remind you, if you don't yet remember Bodhisattva vows, I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to end all self-based confusion. I vow to exercise the Dharma that frees. I vow to attain the great perfection. I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to end all self-based
self-based confusion. I vow to exercise the Dharma that frees. I vow to attain the great perfection. I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to end all self-based confusion. I vow to exercise the Dharma that frees. I vow to attain the great perfection. I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to end all self-based confusion. I vow to exercise